Welcome back, everyone, to another Funderbeam podcast. It's been a couple of weeks. It's just been a lot going on. Our last guest was Rod Beer from the UK Business Angels Association, the UK BAA, and that kind of segues nicely into my guest today. So first I can say hi, Kristina Pereckaite. Kristina, hi, how's it going?
Hello. Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. So today's topic, if you've clicked on this podcast, the millions of you that do, is about starting or founding an angel network. And that's kind of something that is pretty close to everything we're doing at the moment. But most of the people we work with at Funderbeam, and people I work with especially, are from long established angel networks that have all come around from a variety of different reasons and places. But we very rarely get to meet or speak to anyone that started one in the last 2 years, in this case, I think it is. So let's just do the quick intros. Kristina, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Yes, we're definitely new to the scene in the angel investing world. We did start just over 2 years ago with the objective of building a valuable investor community in the South East. But actually, the reason that it was started originally was just to increase investment activity in that region, because I used to, in my past career, I used to run a startup accelerator here in Brighton, which is our home. And comparing Brighton investment activity to all the other cities, it was just really low considering how many great startups there are in this city. So it was kind of born out of that, just thinking, okay, why don't we have any funds or syndicates or go-to investment hubs here in the city? So that's kind of where it started, but it's become much bigger than that, I think, since we started that. And our mission now is just to create this really valuable community for investors and challenge the status quo of the typical investor group. And yeah, create some value both on the startup side and the investor side.
Just for our non-UK listeners, of which there are quite a few, can you just give us a bit of a synopsis as to Brighton and the surrounding region? What's it all about? Like, we kind of know Brighton has a specific vibe, but how would you describe it to someone from outside the UK?
I think it's interesting. I think Brighton's in its own little bubble, really. So if you don't know where Brighton is on the map, it's on the south coast, about an hour train ride from London, which adds to its challenges because London is so close. People tend to go to London to invest or to raise money or to grow their business. But actually, the way that people describe Brighton in terms of the startup scene is that it's kind of an incubator of startup ideas. A lot of ideas are born here. There's a lot of people doing really creative things. In terms of the lifestyle of it, people see it as like a seaside hippie kind of town, which it definitely is. And I think actually that might be one of its challenges, where I've spoken to investors from London in the past, and I'd ask them to come down and view our startup accelerator companies. They would say, what is in Brighton? Isn't it just like some yoga businesses and some creatives? Is there anything serious happening there? And in the last decade, I'd say specifically, it's just really developed. It still has that nice relaxed vibe where people come here to retire and to have a better lifestyle. But there's some really exciting innovation happening here, within the universities, and there's a great VR sort of focused incubator. So in the last decade, we've seen some significant changes in the startup ecosystem here, and so the opportunity for investment is growing.
But there's I mean, for people that don't know as well, it's only a couple of hours from London, less than by train. And traditionally, if you dial back maybe 15-20 years, quite a lot of people that worked in the city of London who maybe wanted to live outside would come from places like Brighton. It's a long commute, but it was a well-trodden one, and it goes via Gatwick, and so there are things going on. And of course, American Express have a huge presence there. And in the world of tech, Brighton's famous, as some of you listening will know, for the Brighton SEO series of conferences about search engines. So I've always felt like there's stuff going on in Brighton, and I definitely agree with you. The hippie, fairly eclectic vibe adds to its charm. But I think there's also been some serious people there and serious stuff going on over the years. So it's kind of interesting that now you can see those things coming to fruition. So for South East Angels specifically, well, actually, let's quickly ask. So why start an angel network? Let's start with that one. What made you want to do that? Because it's not the obvious thing that people just sort of get up one day and think, I'm going to start an angel network.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that we didn't have the typical beginning of an angel group. What tends to happen, a lot of the regional groups that have formed is you'll have an investor who has some friends or colleagues that he or she wants to invest with, and then they form a group, and then they hire somebody to manage the process. Whereas I am not an investor, and I didn't start it for that reason. I started it more so for trying to solve this Brighton problem of why don't we have a go-to place for early stage companies to meet investors and to get funded? Why do they have to go to London and compete with London businesses in the most competitive investment market? And likewise for the investors, there are a lot of companies they can connect with here, but they don't have a place to do that. So rather than them also going and investing in London, there should be some sort of connection for both of those sides here in Brighton. So that's kind of why I wanted to start it, just to solve that problem. I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. We've had a few people come and go, and it hasn't really worked out for Brighton. So let me give it a go, basically, is kind of where it started. And then quite quickly realizing that the whole angel investment world, there's a lot of opportunity to just change the way that these communities are run and change the way that things are done to the standard way. So that's kind of, that was the beginning of it.
I was going to ask you this later on my little list of things to discuss, but I might actually accelerate. So do you feel like a founder? Like, as in, you're talking about solving problems and this is a solution, like this is the standard stuff that we hear from founders when they're starting a business or a company. And do you feel like in your day-to-day that you're not just running an angel network, but you're actually a founder of something, a bit more meaningful, as it were?
I think, I've not really thought about that. And I think it depends how you define founder, right? Like, I think some people would only define themselves as a founder if they're doing something completely new and innovative. And I know we're working in a space that, we formed a traditional angel group really in terms of business model. But I think, because it was started in a different way, we are facing different challenges. So we are trying to figure out a sustainable business model, for example, which maybe other angel groups might have not had to do. So we're innovating in different ways. So I think in terms of that problem solving day to day, I think sometimes we definitely, just from the problems we face, feel like that a little bit for sure.
But I think it's because, as you said, you started from scratch. You weren't a disparate bunch of investors that came together and then said, oh, let's badge this club up as a group. You've sort of decided to solve a problem, and then I guess we'll talk about the strategy of how you get members in a bit, but then you've sort of asked your members yet to be to take trust in you and come into the network. Just before we get onto that bit, so that's kind of cool, but I'm going to test you a bit more on the founder thing later, because I think you probably are more than you realize. What's the South East Angels like thesis or mission? Like, we see some groups concentrate on deep tech or AI or med tech or whatever. What's the South East Angels general vibe?
So because of the reason that we were formed, we actually don't have a specific sector focus. We have a region focus. So all of our investors are based in, the ones that we started with were based in Sussex. We're growing further out to the southeast. So that kind of region brings us together. And so we want to invest more locally. So I guess there's a part of the thesis, which is we're looking for local companies and we will prioritize them over anybody else. And then in terms of sector or interest focus, we have this kind of approach where it changes based on the current discussions of what's happening in the market and what our investors are interested in, because our members actually have such different backgrounds. We haven't come together about one sector. So it means that we have people from finance, from tech companies, from engineering, and they all have very different interests, but they've all joined the group to learn about what's happening in the market and to diversify their knowledge and their portfolios of where they're investing. So what we like to do at South East Angels is we will focus on a particular area. We'll say, recently we focus on space tech. So none of our members know anything about space. They haven't worked in that industry. So we did a bit of a deep dive and we invited a guest speaker on it, and we tried to explore the area a bit. And then we say, okay, what kind of startups can we look at? And is this something our members are interested in? So we take kind of a bit of a different approach to the sector focus.
Yeah, that's cool, because you're an angel network, you're going to get a lot of deal flow, right? You're going to see a lot of pitches, and people are going to come to you occasionally with stuff that you wouldn't traditionally maybe seek out. But it's quite good to be flexible in that you're willing to look at it, even though it's not, maybe they're not a company from Brighton doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and I think that's what our members enjoy, that flexibility. And sometimes we ask them, like, what do you want to see? And sometimes they have an idea, but sometimes they're actually they're saying, well, we want to see what you think. What have you found? Like, what is really exciting in the market? So our team kind of really focuses on finding what's the most exciting thing right now in which sector, and where are the opportunities.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of cool, and it's very interesting when you start something like this from scratch, because you can kind of instill those beliefs from the very beginning, whereas I think there must be some angel networks that maybe are decades old and have had to go through various transitions and different people running it and different senior members and people that are more involved than others that shape what you do, whereas actually you guys are kind of starting from the position that this is what we'd like to do, and then incorporate things as they come, right?
Yeah, absolutely spot on.
So if you don't mind us asking, how many members have you got at the moment? Can you roughly put a pin on it? We're not going to pressure you for numbers or anything, but
yeah, sure. So we've got 20 members in our Sussex group, and we just launched in London, so we've got some people onboarding into our London group as well. So yeah, we're at kind of a good number where now it feels like a community for sure.
So when you break down the groups by region, are you still going to stick to the principle that the London group's still going to be kind of looking at deals from the South East, not necessarily just London alone?
So yeah, so all of our deal flow will be shared amongst all members to kind of add more to each company. To clarify, we look at companies from anywhere in the UK, but we just prioritize those local ones. So we will, because our home will always be Brighton, that's kind of where we started, and the majority of our members are here, will always have that focus. But if you look at the breakdown of our deal flow, around 50% of the companies we look at are from London. You'll always have a lot of London deal flow because there's a lot of companies there. There's a lot of great companies there. You can't deny that. And, we don't want to miss out on those as well. So yeah, I think the Londoners will always be there. And that's just our rules of who we feature. We'll make sure that we have a good balance of local businesses.
So talking of rules, how do you go about, how do companies go about applying with you? Do you do everything online? Do you like to meet people before you put them in front of your members? How's your process work?
So we have an initial sort of application process. We have people coming from loads of different directions. So people who just find us, people who are recommended by our members, and they want to put them through our process, and people who've been recommended by somebody else. So what we like to do is put everybody on a level playing field and not give anybody extra kudos just because they were recommended by a member. We put everyone through the same process, so everyone goes through our application. We evaluate based on like an internal scoring system, and then we definitely meet with every person before they get put forward towards our investors. So obviously we don't accept all the applications, but the ones we do, we have an hour or so chat with them just to get to know the founders, really, because at these early stages, the most important thing is the people. What are their plans? What's their passion? How much of their time and energy are they putting into this? So we spend a lot of time with them before then selecting who are the most relevant and the most exciting opportunities to put forward to
Do you ever feel a tiny bit of pressure if it's a local company applying, as opposed to one from, say, London, that has a sort of a giant market and they're probably going after lots of different networks or whatever? Do you ever feel a sort of, we should probably pay more attention, or we should give them a bit more credence because they're local? Because the other thing is you might bump into these people at other events, right? That's the truth of it, because it's not a massive place.
Yeah, I think in terms of like feeling that pressure, like, yes, we do sometimes, like if there is, because we only can feature 4 companies a month, for example. So this is how it works internally. So we feature 4 a month because we only have so much of the investors, time and attention. So we only focus feature 4 companies, and our internal rules are that at least one of those companies has to be local, and at least one of those companies has to be founded by a female founder. And everything else is on around, well, overall, obviously we're trying to pick the best companies. So what happens sometimes is, okay, we might have some local companies, but none of those are on par with the ones that we're currently looking at for that pitch event. We will go out and find one because we want to stick to our rule, but we also want to bring the best company. So that's kind of what we do internally. But we're also very transparent with everybody in the local ecosystem because we're very well connected with everybody here. So, and it's a small town, right? So everybody kind of knows how people work, and we're very open to say, look, we see hundreds of opportunities and we're going to say no to a lot of people. And remember, we're a small group. So, you know, even if you are a great company and, you know, you're doing really well, it's a great investment opportunity, it might just not be the right fit right now, and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't mean that you guys aren't great, but we can only do so much as a small group at the moment, and I think people really understand that, you know. So we do say no to a lot of people and a lot of local people, and it's just part of the process, I think. Okay, so let's just touch in a bit more detail on the 4 per month thing. So one local company, but interestingly, one company that's female founded. Now, this is something that anyone who's listened to this podcast or has the unfortunate privilege to follow me on LinkedIn will see me banging a drum about all the time. And I even banged the drum pretty hard this morning on it as well. How do you go about, I hate the word quota, but let's just call it a quota because that's your quota is 4 companies a month and one has to be female founded. How do you go about ensuring that A, you get one, and 2, that you're listing for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons? Yeah, great question. And this is the thing, our rule, we have those rules, and then the additional rule is they all have to be really great. So we're not allowed to pick that, you know, pick a female founder just because they're a female founder. And actually, if you do that, you're making it worse for yourself and for everyone, because people will, you know, it will build into that bias of, you know, female founders on par. Like, so that is the worst thing you can do, and it's even worse than not doing it at all. To be honest, I think because of the way we started the business, we've always talked about how important it is to us, the diversity aspect. And so I think based on, I've had a look at some of the stats around how many applications people get from female founders. I think we're higher than the average. So over 30% of our applications are from female founded companies. Wow, that's great. I think it was slightly above the average. And then there's also people who are, you know, the mix composition of female and male founders as well. And so it's not super hard for us to do that, but it's also really easy to not pick a female founder just because you're looking at purely just companies and not teams. So it keeps us mindful, but we have enough great, there are so many great female founders. Like, I don't think we're short of it, but the problem is they might not feel like they have a chance if you don't openly talk about it. They might feel like you might be biased if you don't put it on your application, that you're asking that question. You know, we have a question that asks, are you from an underrepresented group? You know, whether that's ethnicity, gender, and they you know, declare where they feel they're underrepresented. And that helps us to track, like, are we getting enough of those applications to even be able to pick the right companies? And so I think that's where it starts, is just like talking about it, being super open that you're looking for these people because they're out there and they're brilliant. So it's not too hard, to be honest. Once you get started, it's actually quite easy. Yeah, and I think this is probably another advantage of starting from scratch, and that there's no preconceived biases, there's no historical kind of format that you follow, which means that you can really grab hold of these things, and I certainly commend it. Talking of how you evaluate deals, I took your quiz today, and apparently I'm a data nerd, which I think which makes sense a little bit. A little bit harsh, but it's a bit harsh. But yes, so for anyone listening,
Kristina posted a kind of interesting widget that she created using the AI, my best friend, the AI, to create a fun little quiz that determines sort of what investor you are. And I guess I must have answered too many questions about wanting to see numbers and things like that. But anyone listening, I am actually very creative. I just want to say I'm not really a data person, but still.
Yeah, I didn't do too well.
So how do you guys, like, I mean, I know it's a very long, broad question, but let's looking at all the companies in around female founder and local and or otherwise. What's your standard evaluation criteria, and do you have deal size preference and that sort of thing?
So yeah, I guess first of all, in terms of that minimal criteria, we are, we're looking at earlier stage companies. So the kind of general rule that we say is if you're raising more than 2 million, it's probably out of our scope. Although there are some outliers in that case where, I don't know if it's like some sort of med tech or deep tech company, sometimes it just doesn't make sense, it does fit in still. But in order for us to have a significant involvement, we tend to look at deals sort of on the lower end. So pre-seed, seed, maybe verging onto that growth kind of stage. And we obviously look at companies in the UK at the moment, and there has to be, even though it's early stage, they have to have gone past idea. So there has to be something proven, something validated. And it doesn't mean you have to have revenue or customers, but just you have to have done something past saying, here's my great idea and here's how I'm going to do it. So that's kind of the minimal thing that we look at. And then in terms of how we evaluate companies, I think I'm a bit of a data nerd, and I've tried to create a process where we can right, let's create a scoring system and a checklist. And we have a lot of that, but to be honest, even though you go through those typical kind of scoring system processes, there's so much more to that. It's all an art, really, isn't it? Like whether it's setting valuations or whether it's looking at a startup, there's just so much more to it. And we're not a VC, so we're looking at companies that are early stages that fit our members' interests. So it's more like, it's not really quantitative data all the time. So our first focus is just looking at, I guess if we were to give you a bit of like a checklist, what we look for, it's, do we understand what they're doing? Like, is it clear? Can they communicate what they're doing clearly? Because that's just the ultimate thing. No matter how complex the company is, can they clearly explain what they're doing and what problem they're solving? Have they made that progress beyond idea? And then we look at the market. I like that system of looking at, what's the problem? How painful is it? How many people experience it? And how often do they experience it? And suddenly how big the opportunity is. And then you compare their solution to the current alternative and how significant is that? And that's where you're testing, like, how traditional is this business or how innovative is the business? So we look a lot at that. And then after that, we're just looking at the people. So we're chatting to the people, seeing how they respond to a challenge and to our questions. Can they pitch? Can they sell? I've noticed that sales skills are like the most important thing, because if they can sell to you, they can sell to their customers, they can sell to their team members that they're going to have to hire. So we look a lot at that. And then we delve into a little bit of the financial side if they're at that stage, but normally companies are a bit earlier on. So yeah, that's kind of the general things that we will look at the early stages of the application.
That the selling thing's really interesting, because some people are kind of born with it, and some people really struggle to sell, even if they've got the most incredible idea. And that could be down to just sort of different social skills or knowing what someone else wants to hear. But that goes back to the bit you said about how you like to speak to everyone first, right? Because I get this, and when I look at decks, I can see sometimes that the struggle is not in the idea or the business. The struggle is for someone to get it onto the page. And like, not everyone's good at everything, and that's why I don't really like the kind of deck gurus online saying that this is all you have to do, this is all, because there is no this is all, right? It's actually very hard. So anyway, sorry, that's just a minor rant on the side.
No, I believe that. So I honestly think like the most important skills for anyone in any industry is like, you have to work on sales and you have to work on copywriting like that clarity of communicating your ideas. Because even if somebody has an amazing idea and you're like, okay, well, we can just back the idea, it doesn't matter, because somebody with a worse idea but a better executing skills might come along. So that, I think that side is super, super important. And VCs might look at it differently, where they're saying, well, we can replace the founder, we just want the market and the idea. Whereas angels aren't evaluating a company on that basis. We are looking at the people. So
yeah, I get that. What part of your journey so far has given you the most satisfaction? Because you've done quite a lot in the space of 2 years, and building anything that involves members and frameworks and rules, it's not, and then dealing with all the deal flows, not straightforward. So what part of it's given you the most satisfaction so far?
I think there has been a lot of that, like making the process efficient and stuff, which has been quite satisfying. But actually, when I look back, I think sitting in our member events, whether it's our dinners or our pitch events, and just like seeing the whole community just like working, and it's like, oh my God, we've created something of value that it's not really tangible, because it's not number of investments, number of members, but you can just feel it when you're sitting in that room that, okay, these people are now friends and they are investing together and they're creating value in their local economy, and it's just working without us, and it's just so amazing to see. So I think that has given me the most like satisfaction of a feeling in terms of what we created, and makes it all worth it, really. But yeah, that's got to be the top thing. And
that's really cool. But what about the biggest challenge along the way? Where do you feel that's come from? Is it finding the deal flow? Is it finding the members? Has it been credibility coming into a brand new into fairly male dominated traditional space? Has that been a thing, or what would you say has been the biggest challenge?
I think, interestingly, it's been none of those, and the reason it hasn't been a lot of those is because of the support I've had. So when I first had this idea to start an angel group, I have to say, like, my background is not in investing. I did work in investments for a few years, but angel investment was definitely not my experience. Like, it was more on the startup side and building communities. And the first thing I did was I reached out to the most successful angel investor groups in the UK to ask them how they did things. Like, could I do what they've done? And I spoke to Rod from UKBA, which that hour with him was the most valuable to our business at those starting stages, because he was just super, super helpful, and he explained to me how things were done and how we could do things differently. So it was an initial fear of, like, that credibility side. We're entering a whole new market. I don't have experience in it, but the support that I've had from the whole angel investor ecosystem was amazing. And the thing that's been the most difficult is actually, because we are not a typical angel group, it's been figuring out our business model. So how do we create value and stay sustainable and grow as a business ourselves? That's been the trickiest thing, because we're doing something a bit different, even though it's the traditional way.
This is what I mean, coming back to the founder thing, because you've got, with whether you want to have it or not, you've got the pressure of being a founder, and you've got customers, if you like, both sides, and you've got staff, and you've got revenue figures to hit and all the rest of it. So you've got the same sort of pressures. And my point is, as opposed to someone running an angel club that's like the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
The hobbyist, exactly. Oh, I'm part of an angel club, and we're all 50 to 60, and we get these deals on our desk, and it's quite fun in between games of golf. That's there's quite a big difference to that, which is why I asked, do you feel like a founder some days, where it's like, actually, it's not just like running this little thing, it's quite important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it could go either way, like, and it all comes down to, like, what did I want to do with it. But I can see so many other exciting challenges ahead, like around the diversity side and around this, like, building a different, valuable community. So I want it to be more than, a great project that we do that sustains itself. I want it to be more than that. And so I think we're pushing ourselves as a business into all these founder challenges because of that. So yeah, we've still got a lot to learn, but it's super exciting. I love a challenge. So.
Well, I think you've set yourself one, but I think it's going really well in general, because we hear a lot about you and the network, and I think that's sort of a commendation really on everything you've done. What, as Kristina the person, what would you like to see more and less of in the angel investing world on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, I love this question. I think overall, I'd like to see more transparency and openness. And that's something that I built into our core values, is being open and sharing our data, sharing how we do things, and not making it, even though we've got this, we're set as this exclusive community for investors, but actually we can be exclusive as in it's a membership and you need to join to be a part of it. But in terms of how we work and what we do and how we make decisions, we should be sharing that to encourage more people from different backgrounds to become angel investors, and people who haven't raised investment before to consider it. So I think everybody could just be a little bit less like secret club and a bit more like, this is a really crucial part of the economy and how things are done. So I think that's something I'd like to see more of. And the other thing that I found super, super interesting is how different angel investing is in America and it is in the UK. And obviously, I think there's some things I really like about how UK investors act, in terms of we're much more probably diligent and more focused on like numbers and profitability and all that kind of stuff. But there is more of that kind of skepticism and like maybe I don't know, slower activity. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but you're nodding. I feel like you get what I mean in terms of what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we as Funderbeam, we do raise money for some American companies, but we're not allowed to onboard US investors. But the difference when talking to American companies in the mindset of what the investor is like is very notable. And I know from working for companies from both sides, the difference of mindset of getting something done. And the angel investor in the States is backing an idea and expects it to work. And if it doesn't, we backed a bad one. But there is definitely, well, look, it's woven into the fabric of the society, right? You go and get a piece of land that you got to faster than anyone else, on a horse with a load of people. You put a flag in the ground, you build a fence, and now you've made a business. And that's kind of the mentality. And I totally agree with you. The closed shop, club only mentality here, I think, possibly holds us back, even though the sector is booming, of course. But yeah, I get what you mean, and I think that ties back into your sort of transparency bit. There's this argument, I think there's this guy that I follow sometimes online who works for WeFunder in the States, which is a crowdfunding type organization, and most of his tweets are about how investing in cool companies shouldn't just be for the rich. And it's quite a nice way of putting it. I don't 100% agree with it. It's quite a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, and that's such a tough area, isn't it? Because it's like we need so much more diversity of thought in investment. But there's obviously, you don't want to, angel investing is super risky. So how do you get more people from different backgrounds and not just for the rich, as you say, but walk that fine line of like, okay, this is risky and you're going to lose money in this. So that there's that really tricky thing to work out there. But I just, the reason that I said about the American thing was because I've spoken to a few companies that are like doing something huge, like really like deep tech, innovative, is going to change the world kind of companies. And they're having to raise a lot of money and they're doing something that's like really like big vision, long-term thinking. They tend to struggle to raise from UK investors, and they have to, even though they could be huge for the UK, like government or, just in general, our economy, they raise for America. So there I'm like, okay, there's something missing there. Like, what could we be doing more to maybe think bigger? I don't know.
This stuff isn't for us. This is our attitude. Like if I came to you, I was like, I've got this amazing box and it's going to float in space. The first thing you think is that guy can't put anything in space. Space is very difficult. That's your first thought, right? And I'm like, no, trust me, the box, it's going to help everyone. It's going to be like a mini satellite. And the first thing is like, our mentality is like, that's for experts. He doesn't seem like one of those. Whereas I think in the States, they'll be like, can I have a look at the box?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's like, let me see the box. This
Yeah.
sounds cool. And then maybe he can do the box. So I think I totally agree with you. And you're right. I think that maybe sometimes, even when it's interesting that you mentioned space tech actually earlier, because I think people listening are like, wow, you know, space tech. And actually in the States, it's kind of like, yeah, we should be doing stuff in space because it's kind of cool. Talking of space tech, that's a very interesting one. Actually, I just want you to touch on this because I didn't write it in the notes that I sent you, but I saw that I think you held a dinner or a gathering, and then had someone from that industry come and talk to your members. That's a real kind of value add, as well as to just a typical like come and listen to a pitching event, you know, which everyone does. How do your members take that? I mean, this could presumably is what, you know, one of the sort of things they're in it for.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we try and do a bit differently. So, you know, I always say that the thing that's different about us through a traditional group is that we are community first, and the reason we come together is investment. So we're not, you know, we're not purely first like an investor group. And people join to invest, but they join to learn as well. Like they join to learn about different areas, and sometimes they don't know what they want to learn. So it's up to us to say, okay, here's a cool thing that we've heard about, and we're going to feature them. So yeah, what we do at every member dinner is we feature a special guest from an interesting area, whether it's a particular sector or just even like we've had somebody from Bohurst come in and talk about investor trends, or you know, we've had somebody to talk about a particular, like gaming recently was one of the things we talked about. And yeah, I think it's a huge like part of why people stay in the group. So people join because they're like, oh, I want to join an investor group. It feels like the right thing to do. Everyone's saying you have to be part of a syndicate if you want to invest, but then they stay for the community and the insights and the learning that comes with it.
For sure. And I feel like everyone wants something extra for their thing as well. You know, you don't just want to join a group because you get to see loads of decks. I think it's really cool. Look, I'm going to let you go because you've probably got important stuff to do rather than just chat with me all day. Plans for the rest of the day?
Well, for the rest of the day, actually, I'm focusing on a really exciting initiative that we're working on, which is called Future Angels, which is we're trying to make the world more transparent, actually, the whole venture capital world more transparent, by just running a series of events where we invite anybody to come along and learn about how angel investing works and whether they could be one. And we've already just had so many great women sign up, and just people from different backgrounds who are coming to learn about this. So we've got some plans to execute for our first event on the 2nd of March. So that's what I'll be focusing on today.
Great, sounds fun. Well, I look forward to learning more about that and beyond. Thanks very much, Kristina. Anyone listening, I guess you can check out Sount East Angels online. If you Google that, you'll find them top of the page 1. Right, okay, thanks very much for your time, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Oli. It's been great.